p.m., so this meeting will be called. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, 30A-18, in the Governor's March 15, 2020, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted via.
We are live now, just so everyone's aware.
No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Members of the public who would like to participate in the meeting via Zoom can do so by clicking this link. Members of the public who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may also do so via telephone by dialing 1-646-558-8656 and enter meeting ID 833-5385-9178. Then press pound and press pound again at the next voice prompt. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by following the steps previously noted, then press *9 on their telephone keypad or using the raise hand function on Zoom. This will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. In the event that despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide for real-time access, we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as we are able. And now I'd like to take roll call. Chairman Doherty is excused. John Dugas.
Present.
Mary Ann Galezzo.
Here.
Michelle Kincaid.
Muted.
Michelle, you're muted.
Present.
Andrew Levine.
Present.
Martinson.
I'm here.
Bernie Nally.
Yeah.
And Kevin Stokes.
Here.
And Vice Chairman Manganelli is here. We have a little slight change to the agenda this evening. We are going to be meeting with the IT department first and then the town clerk after that. So welcome, John.
Thank you for having me. I do have a short presentation. First off, I just wanted to speak a little to my department's work throughout this year. You know, much like other town departments and certainly, you know, people all over the world, the pandemic has been certainly challenging for all of us. You know, I think for the town, the IT department has stepped up in a very crucial role from the very beginning of this. And, you know, I think we had some great successes and it was a smooth transition. And I just wanted to thank my department and Sue Moran and Andrew Fredette for helping me along the way. You know, I'm certainly the figurehead of the department, but I can't do any of this without the help of my team. So thank you. And I'll move on to the presentation. During one of the previous Finance Committee meetings, there was some interest to see some of the website statistics compared from 2019 and 2020. So I did put together some of that data. We saw an increase of 160,299 total page views from the previous year. I certainly would say that's because of the pandemic and people looking to find more services online through the website. The top 10 pages did change from 2019 to 2020. Online payments became number 2. The homepage is usually number 1. That's the first thing people hit. People were also looking for our department listings and the health department, and of course, our coronavirus alerts. So you certainly see the shift because of COVID-19. As you can see in this graphic, we had a huge spike in March of last year. Governor Baker declared the state of emergency on March 10th, so that definitely is the reason for that influx. Last year, the town also created a Facebook page for the town as a whole. We're seeing a lot more traffic come to the website through Facebook links. Just some other data, 99% of our visitors are using the mobile page. So they're using a cell phone or a tablet to look at our website. And there's certainly a huge increase in the amount of people visiting the online payments page. On social media, we created the Facebook page in March of last year, and I think it's been very successful. We have 888 likes and 974 followers on our Twitter page, which was created a long time ago. We do have much more, probably a lot of Russian bots though, but we have around 2,600 followers. Chris helps out with the Twitter page, and I would like to thank her. And I certainly do a lot of posts on Twitter. I do the majority of the content on the Facebook page. I just wanted to go over some of the highlights of my department of last year. One of our major successes last year was receiving a service grant through the state's Executive Office of Technology Services and Security. It was a cybersecurity awareness training for 333 individuals. This training consisted of the perils, I'd say, of using network devices, using email, various software programs, what to look for, what not to do, etc. This was a collaboration with the public school system. We had participants from both the town and the schools. As you can see, our completion rate was well above the other communities participating in this program, 88.5% compared to 50% the rest of the state. And while I'd like to take some of the credit for this, I think also certainly, Jeff's investment, Glenn Brand's investment in this program has made it highly successful. And I know that department heads were staying on top of their employees to complete the assignments. Like I tell everyone, and I believe I've mentioned this last year to the committee and talking before one of the meetings this year, we're only as safe as our users. Our users are the weakness, and it's like that in any organization. So training our users and our employees and anyone who uses devices on our network is critical to keeping the infrastructure safe. And so I think this program was a huge asset to the town last year. And we actually just heard from the EOTS, Executive Office of Technology Services and Security, yesterday that we were also awarded the service grant for the town for this year. So we'll be continuing that program. And thank you, Jeff, for once again agreeing to let us participate and certainly getting everyone else involved from our department heads. Our support tickets increased somewhat this year. I think I mentioned in the past, the ticket system isn't indicative of too much. You never want to read too much into it. But I have to say, categorically, a lot of the support that we give out really aren't problem issues. They're usually guidance, whether it's a question, a town employee looking for the best way to do something. An administrative task, we see very few issues. I think that's because we continue to invest in technology and keeping on replacement cycles year after year. So I just wanted to speak on that a bit. Other highlights for this year, we completed the critical backup project for our systems last year. With the pandemic, we hosted a certainly extravagant amount of Zoom meetings and scheduled them, along with, we'll edit the recording and post them to the website. We're also in the middle of Office 365 migration. My team helped with the dispatch center redesign. We successfully moved dispatched into a mobile trailer provided by the state so they could still take 911 calls and access the police records software while their room was being redesigned. And certainly we continue to replace computers throughout the town on a cycle. We try to do 20% every year. And we also spent a lot of time moving bodies this year while, the capacity limits changed week to week. We moved people in the auditorium, we moved people into break rooms. We've set people up for remote access. We've set up laptops for our contact tracers, tablets for the vaccine clinics. I think we were critical across the board to, as I mentioned, all the successes we had last year, despite the pandemic and as a result of the pandemic. Moving on to the budget. For anyone who's new, to give an idea, the town's IT department, one of sort of the best, it was just created, I think, maybe 6 years ago. And one of the sort of great things that management did at that time was they centralized IT's budget for all of the town's software. And that forced the hand of, departments. They didn't go astray as far as the overall technology plan. They would have to reach out to IT because it's an IT cost. So given that, the IT department, we handle the software costs for public safety software, all the dispatch software, police and fire, some of the library, all other departments, and their hardware. The only thing we do not do is the schools. The schools have a separate IT department. This is the budget from FY19 to FY22. There is a slight increase to personnel services. That slight increase is due to scheduled salary increases. There is a major increase to contractual services, which I'll get to in a minute. Materials, supplies, training, and conferences stay the same. Furnishings and equipment is the fund that we use to replace our computers, as well as peripheral devices and printers, such as printers, mice, keyboards, web cameras, etc. The delta, the overall increase was $213,343 from FY21. Around $5,000 was scheduled salary increases. As I mentioned, the maximum increase was in the miscellaneous contractual services. The major part of that is the munis annual fee, $199,000. When the town first went to town meeting for the capital funding for the munis project, the costs of 3 years of the annual munis fee was rolled up into that initial capital cost. The plan was at the time, the 4th year, that cost would hit the IT budget. So that's what we're seeing now. Other part of the increase from last year is pavement management software that's used by engineering. That's the new expense. And then there were other general increases to just annual software costs. Our website hosting increased, the public safety record software increased. So that's the majority of that money. For the IT's FY22 capital requests, we're requesting $70,000 for a townwide VoIP system. The phone systems, both at public safety for the business phones and the town for all their buildings, needs to be replaced. There are several points of failure, and especially now during the pandemic where we're heavily relying on the phone system, it's definitely a worry of mine. The phone system at public safety is analog, and it's dated back to before those departments even moved into that building. The zero reporting, if there isn't caller ID over there, so if someone accidentally in an emergency calls the business line instead of 911, dispatch has no visibility to that, which is certainly concerning. On the town's phone system, which is separate from public safety right now, we have a physical server box that routes the calls. There is no backup for that, and it's broken down, I think, once or twice in the past, and there's no way around it. We're sort of dead in the water until that is fixed or replaced. The plan for this phone system will be to eventually expand this system to the schools. The schools are running Skype for Business right now as the phone system with the schools. It makes zero sense for the schools. I've discussed this with Ken Lord. The schools use Google programs. Skype for Business requires them to keep Microsoft user accounts in their network system just for the phones. Microsoft also has done away with Skype for Business. It's no longer supported. Microsoft put all their money into the Teams app of Office 365. So although I think the Skype for Business was fairly new to the schools, they are going to have to move off of that pretty soon. $35,000 is being requested for the replacement of servers at our town hall and public safety. These are the critical servers that we use for all our file shares, for the various software that we run internally, etc. We try to remain on a 3 to 5 year replacement cycle for these. These were last replaced in 2017. It's definitely a need we have. The last is $30,000 we're requesting for the replacement of 5 mobile device tablets for the police cruisers. This cost used to be rolled up in the total capital cost of the cruisers in prior years. That had ended when Chief Pagonis left, and we need to find the money somewhere. And my understanding is that the police are trying not to replace as many cruisers each year as they had in the past, but we want to make sure that we still at least replace these computers. We also need to upgrade them because the police are now printing citations on site in their cruisers when they pull someone over. We need to make sure that those units are spec'd out to meet the requirements for these citation printers. And that's sort of all I have for my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Okay, so I understand that we should be having a conversation regarding Munis. And if you could just give us a kind of year by year recap of what has happened since it was approved at town meeting and where we stand today.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring up a timeline that I drafted for Jeff. I also, want to point out it is an IT related cost, but a lot of the project implementation requires hands-on time from various staff members. The Munis software is highly customizable, and you get what you put in. It's been extremely unfortunate since the get-go of this project, the bumps in the roads that we've come across. And I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we tried to move forward without the full attention and all hands on deck of the staff that needs to put in the work to get this project started. That's creating workflows. For instance, one big piece of Munis is, the town would move to using purchasing. So someone would put in a requisition, and that requisition would trigger a request to a department head who would review the requisition. Then it would turn into a purchase order. All that background work has to be set up in the software system. It's not this, this cookie cutter software where, you get what you get and then you find a way to use it. Munis exists for organizations to make it work for the way they do business. And so I just wanted to put that out there that, as I said, it's been very unfortunate what has happened from the get-go of this project. And I'll run you through the timeline right now, and you can kind of see why we are where we are right now. In July 2018, following the approval at town meeting, we entered into a contract agreement with Tyler Tech. Tyler Tech is the parent company that sells the Munis system. In summer 2018, we began scheduling the coordination for the project. That involves Denise Casey, Jeff Hull, and a number of other team leaders, if you will, of the project. And of course, the schools. The schools are a big part of this because they'll be using it too. In fall 2018, we began the kickoff meetings with Tyler Tech about the Munis software. Quickly after our first sort of team lead meeting, and this occurred in October 2018, the lead of the project, who was basically the project manager, Denise Casey, and her clerk, who was a big part of the project, Jacqueline Laverde, resigned from the town of Wilmington. In November, right afterwards, in November 2018, the project lead of the human capital portion of the project, Kelly Daigle, resigned. Jeff Hull, seeing the writing on the wall of where this was going with the software project, started to engage Tyler in a conversation to see if we could freeze the project until we could refill those staffing positions. Unfortunately, we were still incurring the cost of the project at the time for the cloud hosting. In January 2019, the town hired Denise Casey's replacement, Carrie Colburn-Dion. In February 2019, the town hired a payroll and benefits coordinator to replace Kelly Daigle, who had left. They had hired Kathy Godfrey. In March 2019, the town's assistant town accountant, Lorraine Herman, retired. Although Lorraine wasn't a major piece of the project, she was a body in the accounting office that could do the work while other members of that department were working on the project. The town hired her replacement, Beth Lalleman, to work alongside the newly created finance director position. If you remember, the town ended up redesigning the departments to create a finance director position that would oversee the treasurer's office and the assessor's office. In June 2019, the town hired the new finance director, Brian Perry, to work alongside the longtime town accountant, Mike Morris, who was retiring in July. In July, Mike Morris retires. Now you have to consider that during this time that, you know, Ryan, Beth Lallman, they're all sort of getting their bearings with how the town operates. So in August 2019, Brian Perry assumed the project lead and began to coordinate the new project schedule for Munis. In November 2019, that's when we officially resumed with the on-site meetings and kickoff meetings and the overviews from Tyler. In December 2019, that's when the implementation sessions began with Tyler, and we started getting into the nitty-gritty of the software itself. In January 2020, we were still on track as far as everything goes. We were working with Tyler on the configuration and development. The schools were participating in these meetings. We were all working towards a July 1st go live date for the financial segment of Munis. February, March 2020, the pandemic begins. We can no longer have in-person meetings with Tyler. It throws everything to disarray. Of course, you know everything that occurred with the schools. We were trying to figure out what we could and could not do as far as town operations. It brought the entire project to a standstill. And as you know, in April 2020, our buildings closed to the public. Our buildings are still closed to the public as of today. And we met in January of this year to try to figure out what could be done to get this thing moving forward.
Well, I do not think that you could have come up with any more disastrous timeline. Clearly, these are all key people that were involved in the implementation of the software that one after another, for various reasons, left the employment at the town. What kind of effect did this have? I guess I have two questions. One, what kind of effect financially did this have on the town? Because we still don't have the ability to utilize this software. And secondly, did I read that correctly that you expect July 1st of this year to have everything completed?
So I will defer the first question to Brian Perry. The second question, he can also speak on, but we had met and we still don't have the capacity to move this project forward to try to reach a July 1st start date for the financials. We are still talking and trying to figure out how we're going to make this work for the town. And on that note, I'll hand it over to Brian.
Thank you, John. Just to at least touch on, I guess, the expenditure so far is going back to the town meeting of 2018. It was voted for $941,800 be used for the project for Munis to be implemented. The cost to date has been about $596,000, and a large part of that is the annual fee that we owe, the $199,000 that you see in John's budget. We were able to get a credit of $50,000 from Munis before for the first freeze that we had due to the staff turnover. So that's about $550,000 of the $596,000 was spent to date. The rest of the nearly $50,000 has been for various hardware, software pieces, implementation, and obviously the on-site consultant we had that we would have Tyler on site to work collaboratively with us all the way up through this time last year. The first 2 weeks of March, they were on site. And then the pandemic obviously intensified they couldn't travel and everyone's hands were tied as far as trying to figure out how to proceed on the project. So it obviously came to a standstill at that point. The 7/1 date would have been 7/1 of 2020 that we were targeting to go live. We were on schedule to do that as of this time last year, when the project obviously ground to a halt. As far as next steps is that we are still trying to figure out, I guess, how we can work collaboratively to get everyone involved and move forward. If we can't, then I guess how we have to try and move forward. So that's the steps that we're still trying to piece together. As John said, there's a lot of customization needed to have this work properly. And when you're spending the money to have a piece of software like this, you do want to have it customized to be fully functional and fully useful for everyone involved. So it's not just a piece of my office saying we're going to do it and we have to do it. It's not just John's office saying that, and it's not just schools. We're trying to make sure everyone's all pulling in the right direction and all on the same page instead of trying to force something on it. So that's really where we are for trying to have the discussions and figure out how and when we want to proceed with the project.
Madam Chair, if I could just offer a few comments. Clearly from my perspective, this is one of my worst nightmares in terms of going to a town meeting, getting the funding. Clearly from my perspective, based upon the work that had been done leading up to this, the SoftWrite system that we have been operating on since I believe 2008 or thereabouts is a legacy system. The company that operates it has not made any upgrades to it. I certainly can't speak to all the limitations because I don't use it as intensely as Brian and others do, but the reporting and perhaps Brian or Carrie or others could speak to that, but the reporting is very limited. It doesn't have the customizing capabilities. It's not scalable. So we're essentially operating using a software system that is freeze-framed in 2008. So the idea of needing to upgrade, I guess the other point I would make, and again, perhaps John can speak to this more specifically, but from a security standpoint, the prospect of ransomware and infringements on the system are much greater with the SoftWrite system as opposed to the Munis system. So there's clearly value to having this system in place, but ultimately, we have to execute on the plan. And given the circumstances that were outlined, we haven't been able to do that. And it's certainly beyond frustrating that we've spent this money, and to this point we have the chart of accounts. So we're basically in order to do this the right way, we're essentially having to build the system, so to speak. There's a whole series of building blocks where we're creating the financial system, and Munis will operate based upon how we create that system. And if we don't create that foundation, Munis is only going to operate as functionally as we design it. So the challenge has been that we put some of the pieces together, the chart of accounts and some of the general ledger elements, but we haven't been able to fully develop that. And so until we do, we're not able to roll it out. The other piece of this clearly is we need to train staff on how to use this system. One of the, in my estimation, virtues of the Munis system was going to be the prospect that instead of having payroll entered twice, for example, because right now the clerical staff prepares it, it's signed off on by the department head. It comes down to the benefits payroll coordinator, who then has to input it again. The plan was that with Munis, the clerical personnel would input it directly, so it reduces errors and so on. But that also requires all of these people to be trained. So there's a lot of upfront work required to make that functional. So, I think at this point, as I've talked to staff here, we're going to have a serious sit down as to where we go from here. This 199 is essentially the membership fee, if you will, to have access to all the features that Munis offers. And the challenge, we're in a very difficult situation. If we pull the plug, so to speak, that means we're, for the foreseeable future, relying upon a system that, I think is certainly has a lot of question marks. I think they're not investing in it anymore. The staff that from SoftWrite that are involved and that assist us, many of them have left. So, I don't know how long that system will be running. So there's that whole risk. On the other hand, the last thing I want to be doing is spending money on something that we're not getting any value out of. So, and to go back and, just stay with the SoftWrite system, I think puts us at risk in a number of respects. It also is challenging, as I say, to use the system because it isn't customizable. I don't, quite frankly, want to be in a position of having to go back to town meeting in 2 or 3 years and pursue a new system because that's just going to be more costly and has its own set of problems. So at this point, we're going to have an internal meeting to decide how to go forward. If we go forward, it's going to have to be some tough discussions on this.
I'd just like to clarify one thing. The SoftWrite system we're on, Jeff keeps mentioning, is no longer being developed. There are multiple versions of SoftWrite, including whatever the company's latest product is now. Our system that we're using, our on-site system, it's static. It will be the same. We don't receive updates for it. It is what it is. Even if we cans the Munis project, we at some point would still need to move to another software at some point. And if that would be another SoftWrite product, there would still be this entire project of migration, implementation, et cetera, et cetera. The SoftWrite the SoftWrite version we're on right now is drastically different than any of the new stuff that we put out there. So there would still be that entire migration.
So can I ask a question? Why would we want to consider pulling the plug at this point if we're already?
I don't think we should.
No.
I voiced this. Certainly, we absolutely cannot pull the plug on this project.
Okay.
No.
We need to find a way to get this project done. We're a huge organization is budget-wise, and I think one of the arguments back when we first went out to town meeting for this project, we should have a software system, that is reflective of the budget we have as this town. What we're using right now it's not intuitive to our users. We can't forecast. You don't really get anything in real time. There are a million different limitations. One of the larger pieces of the Munis argument was the human capital piece. As you saw last year, the towns added a HR generalist because there's a lot of work that needs to be done not only for our employees, but our retirees. One of the benefits of Munis was having the self-service system where, an employee or retiree can go into the system and make changes themselves. They don't have to bother one of the town's administrative staff. And then we could, focus on more important things for the town rather than, all the manual tasks that we do now. That automation was going to be a huge benefit to the town. So we need to get this project done.
So what is the major issue at this point that the town needs to get over in order to get the system up and running? Take the pandemic out of it, take the personnel rotation out of it as far as people leaving. What do you need to get the system implemented? What is bogging it down at this point? Is it data entry?
No,
More so than anything?
we've got the chart of accounts is already in there. That's already been developed, created, and that's loaded. On the town side, we've loaded the departments. All those, basically all the users have been loaded with developed permissions and roles for them. It's a permission-based system or a rules-based system. So those have been at least built out. The biggest thing is having everyone test it and break it and figure out what they're supposed to do, what they can't do, and then move forward there. That's going to be the biggest thing. That's where we were last spring when it fell apart.
So why can't?
Well, let me just add.
Please identify yourself before you speak.
Sure, Jeff Hull. So one of the things I'll let Paul Ruggiero speak to this, but one of the challenges, as I understand it, is as the town has to develop the system on its end in terms of the customizing it, the school has to go through a similar process. And I know obviously the schools have had their own challenges. And perhaps, Paul, you could speak to where the school department is with regard to building your part of the system.
Before Paul says, sorry, Paul, can I just bet on for a second? The major issue is just dedicating bodies to sit in a room, learn the system, configure the system, use the system. We've all, not just on the town side, not just on the school side, this pandemic, we've been in disarray. There's some staff working at home, there's staff working in the auditorium, there's staff working in break rooms. Everything has just been, it's just everywhere. And so to dedicate time, it just seems completely impossible right now. And that's not for any one department. That's for the town and school across the board on a whole. We're certainly doing a lot more through the phone. The staff that needs to be answering the phones all day. It's just almost impossible to be able to take people out of their traditional roles right now to dedicate them to this project. And it's certainly, concerning, and we have to find a way to move this forward. And it's our hope that, as we're seeing now, as the pandemic eases and we're allowed to have more staff back in the buildings, that we can hopefully find a way to get this thing moving forward. I'm sorry, Paul, go ahead.
That's okay. Good evening, Paul Ruggiero, Assistant Superintendent of Administration and Finance with the schools. Thanks for inviting me. I'm going to be perfectly honest on this call. The schools right now just don't have the capacity to move forward. A project of this scope is a full-time job. And essentially, as we moved through it pre-pandemic, there was 3 of us, excluding the payroll and HR component, working on it. 2 of the 3 will be leaving the Wilmington Public Schools over the summer. So I'll be losing my 2 right-hand people. Couple that with just trying to get kids into school, whether it's this year, definitely next year, and everything that comes along with that. The capacity and the ability to to put everything aside to work on this project. It's just not there from the schools. And I'm being honest with you. I think some of you know me, and I don't, I'm not afraid of hard work, but I just have to be honest. You know, if my two right-hand people won't be around to work on this, you know, I'm involved in trying to get, you know, as I mentioned, the kids back into school. We have a whole host of other things, and you know, that's a concern we have on the school side.
Do we need to include the schools before we can get this up and running? Or is that something that can be added after the fact?
No, I think to build it right, it has to be, you kind of have to move everyone along at the same pace, because once we go live, we need to have one single source of truth for the general ledger. And we can't have the schools operating on one while we're operating on a different, or try and go live literally just in the town and then have the schools try and catch up at a later time. That's just ripe for failure, to be honest.
So that means that we would have to sit out another year at a cost of $200,000 because first of all, I feel that we selected Munis for a reason, and there were sound reasons, and we're invested in this already significantly. Fortunately, through nobody's fault, we are where we are. But we have to look forward, and we have to figure out a way to get this done. I don't think a year from July is acceptable. And
No.
now we'll be $800,000 into nothing. And try explaining that at town meeting. That's very concerning to me. It sounds like there's a lot of COVID fatigue, and I totally understand that. And I'm not being judgmental of the people who are trying to get this task done. But I do feel that this needs to be an extreme priority. Not just a priority, not a high priority, an extreme priority, because this has already taken taxpayer dollars and it's gone. And we're going to continue to incur a significant expense without moving anywhere closer to the goal line. And that concerns me. And again, I'm not judging the people who have been involved in this. I listened with full interest to the timeline that was given, and I just couldn't believe it. I don't think you could write something like that. And to hear Paul say that he's losing his two right-hand people, I mean, how much worse could this get? So I don't have an answer for you, but I do have great concern. I would like to know when the meeting happens, if the finance committee could get an update on the highlights of that meeting and what the plan is to move forward. And I have full faith in our IT department and our management team in town hall and the schools to figure something out. I mean, if you need to call in other people to come in and help establish this in the data source, maybe that's what you need to do.
So Kincaid, have you thought about hiring or have you thought about bringing in temporary help to help with this? There are probably there are people out there that have done it before, and Munis especially, because it's a widely used software by lots of cities and most towns anyway, few cities. I just didn't know if you put any feelers out there to get some help, because I'm in the COVID coma myself. So I definitely know where you're coming from with the shortage of people and everything going on. I totally get it. But I also understand the amount of money that we are spending each year. And each year we push this off. It's a sin that we're actually, doing that, but I just think that you should think about possibly getting some temporary housing. I mean, that just will focus on that. That's all they'll do is the implementation and the testing.
I think this is Jeff Hull, Madam Chair, if I could just respond to that. I think all options are on the table if we need to look at bringing in help. I guess the question, not to get bogged down in the weeds here, but in terms of developing the structure, so to speak, the foundation of this system, is that work that an outside consultant or outside bodies can do, given that the people who are going to be using the system are the people that are here. I don't know. Maybe we can, but I don't know.
I'm just telling you from experience that it can be done, but you just have to put the feelers out there. And just because that person is actually going to be maybe doing the heavy lifting, it doesn't mean that the people that actually are trying to help with the planning and the mapping of the system aren't going to be part of it. It just means that they'll be in there to help, do the detail work and the testing and the, all the different setup work that needs to be done. It's just an idea. I just think that everybody's tired. I totally get it, but it still needs to get done. And
absolutely, Jeff Hull again. No question. It's this is not something that this is not a certainly something I wanted to find a place I wanted to be in. Obviously, I fully understand that this is taxpayer money. It's our credibility, quite frankly, and to have gone to this point, and clearly there was, as was pointed out through the timeline, there was a series of unfortunate events, but at the end of the day, it's still money that has been spent, and we do not have a system that we can execute on. So we will meet and look at all the options, including whether bringing in some kind of staffing assistance. I think everything's on the table, and we'll certainly report back to the Finance Committee in terms of how we plan to go forward.
Hi, this is Mary Ann Galezo. Jeff, I think everybody, well, myself anyways, can't speak for all the committee. We need a really structured timeline at this point on getting the system up. Paul, thanks for your honesty as far as saying you can't get this done in a year. But what do you need to get this done in a year? Would Michelle's suggestion of temporary staff help you out in this instant?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Jeff said, I think, everything's on the table. And I think that, if we have an internal meeting, then report back to the Finance Committee. I don't know what other options there are out there. There might be something else that comes up as well. But yeah, I mean, everything's on the table. I mean, we don't not want this to work. It's just, it is what it is, unfortunately. There's a lot going on and staffing and so forth. But I think as Jeff mentioned, that we should meet internally, come up with a plan, put all the options on the table, choose the best course to move forward, whether that's hiring a consultant to do the system or whatever it is, and then report back to the Finance Committee.
Is there a specific, do we have to start or go live on July 1st of a deadline for December 31st? Is that doable? Or some other point without going for another full year?
I would this is Jeff Hull again. I would suggest perhaps that Brian or Carrie speak to that. I think what we've focused on just is either a July 1st or December 31st, depending upon the circumstances. I think from a payroll standpoint, you want to, if you can, start on a January 1 because of the tax year, July 1, obviously from a fiscal year standpoint. But Brian or Carrie, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, July 1 was the plan before for the GL. This is the first leg of a multiple phase project where once the GL's implemented and gone live, then we would work on the payroll piece. For the payroll piece, excuse me, we've already contracted with Clifton Larson Allen to help work us through that piece. That's a pretty sizable piece. There's a lot of underlying foundation to build that one properly between all the salary tables, the grids, and the way everything ties together on that end. So we've already thought about that. We had literally had meetings the first or second week of March with Clifton Larson and with Tyler Technologies on site. To begin that, we were very aggressive last year of trying to run 2 tracks at once when this hit. The reason for the 7-1 was to work for the GL was simply it's the start of a new fiscal year, and that would have been the cleanest entry point for that. But that there by no means doesn't preclude you from starting on any other time. Whenever everyone's comfortable and we're ready to go live, we can import the data that we've had for the time period. I'd certainly work to do that and be comfortable with it. And again, the thing is, it's not a flip the switch and everything's live. It's a multiple phase project. So the GL, we weren't far off from going live on. We were very close to rolling it out to multiple users instead of having the same 7 or 8 people in a room for a week at a stretch. Is once we were able to start rolling it out, training people and having other people see it who would be using it on a daily basis, is that's when we're going to start to hit a critical mass, and that's when everything honestly fell apart middle of March last year. But we're not too far off on that from the GL. But once you get the GL live, it doesn't mean everything's good and you're all set. It just means you're going to have the next phase of work working on, as John mentioned, the human capital piece, which includes the payroll. And then after that, there's another piece that deals with revenues for billing, for excise tax, that sort of stuff. So it's not that simple in a one-tier project, but we had been close on getting the first leg going.
Anybody else?
John Dugas, I've got just one thing. We've talked a lot about the ops of this, but just to put some bars around, what we're really talking about here is this Munis license fee is just the $200,000 a year or $199 a year. Like, is there, I guess depending on how this goes, is there potential that we have to use more of Tyler Tech's like consultancy stuff to build this out to a different degree, or are we really just talking about, I think 200,000 is like 16 basis points of the budget here. So, I just curious, really.
I don't quite, the 200,000 is basically the annual fee. There is, going back to the vote from originally the 940 some odd thousand, is that included in their contract, their implementation fees or consulting fees to help get the project running? I mean, that could slide either up or down depending on the extent of their usage. If we had them on site, well, we can't have them on site at this point anymore, but if we had pawned off more work on them, obviously the consulting fee would go up as well on that end of it from Tyler Technologies standpoint. And that's independent of the annual user fee.
Jeff Hull. So Brian, maybe you could speak to the point of, as I understand it, the amount that was, if you peeled out the portion for Tyler's consultancy, we have not fully expended that. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. We have about 350,000 still to spend on that to get us through not just the GL, but then the payroll and the revenue piece of that.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
We've expended what, over 600,000 at this point?
Just shy of 600,000.
But that's just the annual.
That's made up of three installments of the annual fee. One of them was reduced as they agreed to knock off 50,000 from basically from the initial freeze to it. We had spent another nearly 50,000 on consultant implementation costs and some hardware and software upgrades.
Okay. Well, thank you for your efforts in getting that $50,000 reduction. That's appreciated. So am I correct in assuming or in thinking that the major piece here is the schools? Is that it sounds like you are in a position to get the town side with some effort or some help, or
There's still more work to be done, both on both ends.
Right, but it sounds like has the school done anything, or
Yes.
it has?
They're
Okay,
they're in the same we go through the meetings together. We do the same
Okay.
work the same week, and then at one point we had split the work so they could get more hands-on, and we could meet with the consultants and go on some different things. But it's not from a lack of effort. I think what helps on the town side is I've used Munis before previously. The assistant finance director Beth Lallman had used it as well, so we have experience with it, so we know a lot of I think what ties the themes that tie together in the background when you're using it and how you use it. So the training had been, we were a little accelerated as opposed to people who hadn't seen it before and trying to understand some of the concepts. The way the school operates, Paul could speak to it too. It's a different, there's different workflows in the school office than there is in town hall. And we want to make sure the software is updated and customized to be optimized for everyone's usage. And that's what we've been trying to do when we're building it and moving forward.
right. So, but the primary concern, because, so are you telling me that the town and the schools are both at the same point in development and implementation of this?
I don't know if we are necessarily. I know we're pretty close. We would work
Okay,
on the same
that's good
thing. I
enough.
know, yeah, no, I know.
Yeah,
that
that's
I think
fine.
we've probably ran ahead on some of the stuff because we can, but it's not. We try to work on the same stuff at the same point, so everything moves together at the same rate, basically.
Okay, that's good to know, because,
If I could, this is Paul
Yeah.
again from the schools, if I could. So we have, and as Brian mentioned, none of us on the school side have any experience in Munis. So it was all brand new to us. The other difference is, and I know the town's moving this direction, but we do requisitions and purchase orders and so forth, and it's decentralized. So all of our administrative assistants do that and so forth. We haven't even broached it because we don't understand it enough right now to even go from the training standpoint and so forth. Because we're all, essentially everything's, purchase order driven on the school side. So we still have quite a ways to go on the school side.
okay, just so that we're clear, the finance committee is just trying to wrap their head around this situation. So the questions we're asking are so that we can understand where we are at. So that's the point of the questioning, trying to figure out in our minds, like, how bad is this situation? Is it salvageable? And what's to come of us?
This is Jeff Hull again, just to your point, Madam Chair, I fully appreciate the questions. I mean, this is clearly not a pleasant topic for me to be talking about, but obviously it is what it is. And, we need to, long and the short of it is we need to come to a resolution. And I guess, and I appreciate the comments that have been made by, certainly Brian and Paul and John. But, I guess I'm looking at it from the perspective, everything's on the table. But if we're not able to execute on this, to this point, we've got a sunk cost there that we can't retrieve. What I'm looking at is, do we have to pull the plug? And I certainly don't want to do that, but at some point we have to either commit to executing this in a hard timeline, Or if we can't do it, then we have to admit that and cut our losses, so to speak. I guess, and I don't certainly want to do that because there's been a lot of time and effort put into this, and having to go back to square one and in a whole redo, I think is also unpalatable. But so this conversation that we're going to have is really going to, the expectation is, from my perspective anyways, that we'll come out of this with some clarity as to how we're going to handle this.
Mary Ann Galezo, I guess my concern is if you do decide to pull the plug, you're back to step one and we'll still have outdated software. And to start this process over again with another software company is just going to bog us down even longer.
I personally don't even think that's an option.
Thank you.
Not only we would have to go back to town meeting and
Yep.
ask the public to give us more funding for another software project. And after the optics of this,
It's not
I
going to
don't know
go
how
well.
that would be approved.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I would approve it on the finance committee at this point. I mean, we have to figure this out. And we have to figure it out with the software system that we have now that we're already $500,000+ into. I totally agree with Michelle. We have to go outside the box here and find some sort of solution on getting other people in to help implement this into this town. There has to be advisors out there. We can't be the only ones who have these problems. And there's got to be a solution, and we have to come up with it quickly.
Agreed.
Okay, and does anybody else have any comments?
This is Kevin Stokes. I have a different comment if we can change the subject.
Oh, you want to change the subject, Kevin?
All right, Kevin, let's go.
I just, I didn't want to lose sight of John's opening comments. I mean, this has been a trying year for everyone. And what the IT department was able to do in terms of just, maintaining some sense of normalcy for all of it, even though this is the new normal and it wasn't a year ago, we were all in person. That was a pretty big pivot, and to, all the other effects, I'm sure that he had to manage with just now having to figure out how to get the staff working remotely and all the problems that goes with that. And he's on every one of these meetings every night of the week, it seems like. So, kudos to the team for doing that and doing their job very well and very professionally without griping. And, I haven't heard anybody complain about this being disruptive. Nobody liked it initially because it was certainly a different change, but in terms of the technical operation, this has gone pretty smoothly in the time that we have it. So kudos to John and the team and, everybody really for being able to be so resourceful to pull this off. So it's not a small feat. And, certainly, I definitely think the team needs some recognition for that. And the other thing, I guess I will go back to the Munis piece there. If you got the chart of accounts done, you got to hang in there. That's the big elephant. So if you've got the chart of accounts done, you've got some light at the end of the tunnel. There are organizations, speaking for myself, I've been in this situation before. This is not easy. It's hard. We had to call in some outside help to bail us out. I could share some names probably offline, but we got to, stick it through. I'd rather be talking about getting a separate appropriation for a consultant to come in and make it right rather than trying to pivot to a different application. Lots of people use this product and they've all had challenges, but lots of people are successful with it. And quite honestly, there's not a very big population of vendors in the space anymore. So the options are limited. So I think we have to fix forward and figure out how to get out of this and put a team together to do that.
I agree.
Kevin, thank you for your comments, and full disclosure, there has been some griping. And I'm sure Jeff and Carrie can attest to that. I've griped a little bit.
Fair enough.
But Jeff Hull, so just to jump in again, I do appreciate Kevin's comments, and it's certainly John and Andrew and Susan that we've really leaned on them heavily. And to your point, they've been covering so many of these meetings, the vast majority, and for anybody, obviously we all have families and other lives, and to have to be dedicating multiple nights a week, every week, says something. So I certainly appreciate their efforts. And this is just one aspect of their jobs.
So Kevin took quite a few of my points already, so I'm not going to repeat them. I would like to say that, John, I do feel like your department did step up in a very big way. You made the transition to something none of us had even imagined, seeing seamless on our end. So, that is a credit to you and to your team for the excellent work that you have done in the past year and even prior to that. This Munis situation is causing so much stress to everybody in the town. I think that most of the comments here tonight have been that, you need to continue moving forward, or we certainly hope that you can continue moving forward. And we have confidence that this will get accomplished because we have confidence in you and in the rest of the town. So hang in there, and thank you very much from all of us for helping us through this difficult time. Does anybody have any other comments?
Bernie, for this shot quick. It seems with this Munis system is used almost statewide. There has to be a lot of people that have run the systems, created the systems, that might be available for working contract-wise or on overtime, or not our overtime. But there must be people available that could help get it rolling again, to do that, the background work that has to be done. And our own people would have to pick up a lot, certainly, but there just should be somebody or a number of people available someplace. That's my thought. The help should be needed.
Okay, anybody else? All right, John, you're off the hot seat.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very
John,
much.
for all your work.
Thank you,
Thank you, John.
Paul.
And thank you. Have a good night. We'll see you
Thank
next
you,
week.
Everyone.
See you next week, yeah.
Okay, and now Tina,
Good evening.
town clerk, good evening.
Hi, Tina.
How's everyone?
Good, how about you?
I'm good. So, before I give my presentation, I'd just like to talk a little bit about what we went through last year, and just to show you how well we used the funding that we had to do the things that we had to do that we've never had to do before. As you know, we were hit with the pandemic, and we were hit with not being in the office for a while. But more than that, we were hit with how to run elections safely and securely, and how to keep our workers safe, how to keep ourselves safe, how to keep our voters safe. And the state made a lot of changes to the voting laws, and certainly by putting in that, they were going to mail out applications for early ballots to every voter in Massachusetts for both the state primary and the state election in September and in November. Our work increased, tremendously for a little staff of 3 people. So we could not have done what we did without the recreation department. I just want you guys to know that without them to assist us in handling all of those ballots, and I'm going to give you some numbers in a minute, I just don't think that we could have done it. So kudos to them, and to many other people in the town hall staff. People from the manager's office helped us. We had a lot of help, but the recreation department was the clerk's office. I don't know, south, north, I don't know the direction. office, but they were. So we, at the state primary, that state primary, the one between the presidential primary and the presidential election every 4 years, is traditionally the slowest and lowest and least voted election in the whole 4-year election cycle. In 2016, the turnout for that primary was 5% of our voters. And that's pretty typical of, statewide. It's just not a high turnout election. We had 37% turnout for that primary because of the mailed-in ballots. We had about 3,000 mailed-in ballots and another 3,000 or so people who came and voted in person for that election. So that's not a high number. 60-something hundred people voting is not a high number, but in comparison to what it usually is, it was high. And it prepared us for the onslaught of the November mail-in season. We processed 11,000 early and mailed-in ballots before Election Day in November. And we did that primarily by a process of advanced processing and advanced depositing of all those ballots. So those 11,000 ballots never saw Election Day. They were already processed. We didn't have the numbers from them, but they were already processed. As you can imagine, the workload and the number of people that we needed to help us to process those ballots was phenomenal. And we were able to secure some funding from a place called the Center for Tech and Business Life, and we got a grant from them. And we were able to take a lot of the costs that we incurred, extra costs that we incurred, and use that grant to help us pay for them. We also, in the interest of trying to keep everyone safe and distance and inside on Election Day, chose to move our election to the Shriners Auditorium, which generously was offered to us free of charge. But a tremendous coalition of every department in the town came together and pulled off what I thought was an amazing feat, and it was a great election day. And again, because of this grant that we had, we were able to not incur a lot of extra cost on the town. Even though we have some grant funding and stuff too, that we could have taken care of that with. So I just wanted to kind of talk about what the last year has been like in the clerk's office. And now I'll turn to my budget, which is split into 3. So I was thinking of going 10, 11, 12 in terms of the departments, but in your books, that's not the way the books go. So if we want to start with department number 11, which is elections and town meeting, that's on page 16. If you want to, if that's something that you want to do, we'll go in that order. So you can see that the election expenses for this year are far less, and that's because we have 2 less elections. The personnel is down. There is an increase to the printing, advertising, and budget line item. And the reason for that is that we will, at the end of this year, have to, or at the beginning of next year, we have to redraw our precinct lines because of the 2020 census. So I anticipate, although I don't have any numbers because they've pushed off giving us numbers until September, well, we'll probably get our number of just total population, we'll probably get sometime next month. I expect us to go up over 24,000 people, meaning we're going to need to add a 7th precinct to Wilmington because the law only allows for 4,000 people in a precinct. So we have 6 precincts now. If we go over 24,000 people, we're going to have to add a 7th precinct. So there'll be some movement of lines, redrawing of lines, redistribution of people between and among precincts. When that happens, presuming it does happen, we need to notify all the voters of the any change in precincts, change in voting locations. When we were getting ready last year to move the polling location and put everybody at the Shriners, we were able to find a company that sent out postcards for us. And so I'm taking the additional $4,000 that's in the printing, advertising, and binding budget is because of the fact that we're going to need to send that notification out. That's a matter of law that we have to send that notification out. So that's where that increase comes from. Everything else is decreased, and the reason, as I said, is because because we only have one election as opposed to 3 elections. So that is that particular budget. I think I should just see if there's any questions before I move on to the next section. Okay. Part of, I don't know if it's not in the actual budget book, but we have a capital request coming out of the election section also, and that is for new voting machines to be purchased next year. The approximate cost is $45,000. It might be a little less. We're proposing that we get some reimbursement from the state for certain expenses that we incur that's been determined to be an unfunded mandate. And we put those into an account that we usually use to pay off expenses. So the thought is we're going to take about $10,000 from that account, leaving us a little wiggle room because I'm not quite sure I'm going to have enough to get me through to the end of this year because of the extra expenses we incurred. And so that will go towards, so $10,000 from that account will go towards paying for those machines, and then will be $35,000 will come, out of the tax levy or just out of the general funds of the town. So those machines that we'll be purchasing are the next generation of the machines that we now use that are about 20 years old and have served us well, but certainly it's time to move on and make sure that we continue to be able to run good, strong elections. So that is the capital purchase that we have requested for this year. So that's all I have for elections and town meeting. If nobody has any comments, then I'll move on to page 18, which is the Registrar of Voters, Department 12. So as you can see from that line item or from that budget, most everything is stable except for in miscellaneous contractual services. That's gone up quite a bit. Well, it's gone up about $2,500. And the reason is that traditionally, Wilmington has done its own census. So we print it off the state system. We then have to get a mail house to mail it out. We have to buy all of the paper. We have to buy all of the envelopes. And, it's a long, arduous, very labor-intensive process. It probably worked very well when you had a staff of 3 and 15,000 people in the town. But when you still have a staff of 3 and you've got 25,000 people in the town, it really takes a lot of time. And for about $500 more for, the total of what we spend, we have decided, and this year actually did, send it out to a vendor. The advantage of using this vendor is that they do all the work for you. So you just have to process the returns when they come. But also we have much more flexibility with what that census form looks like. And it enables us to have information that otherwise we'd have to go back out to the people to find once they send their census in. So it really, it kind of brings us forward with a little bit of extra money. It enables us to be much more efficient in the clerk's office. And so that's where the increase there on the miscellaneous contractual services comes from. Our postage cost actually went down a little bit, or goes down a little bit in this budget, because this particular vendor has some ability to give us an even lower rate than we have been using to send out the census form. So we save a little money with that. But it's in general, it's about a $500 increase over what we normally spend in all of those different areas to get the census taken care of. And That really is all I have to say about that particular budget. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, Bernie here. How accurate is the census that you get back?
You mean to give us a number of people that are in town?
Yeah,
Not accurate, I wouldn't say. You know, people don't respond. Some people don't put their kids on it. It's not really an accurate way of counting. The census, the real purpose to the census is to keep our voter list up to date as well as we can. Because if somebody leaves town and doesn't move to another Massachusetts community and register to vote there, we might never know they're not there anymore. So the census is the way the state kind of has fashioned this whole scheme of how to try to keep your voter list up to date. And so the census really, it's kind of a misnomer because you think census, it's going to tell you how many people are in town. And I would never use that number. I always rely on the number that comes from the decennial census, the every 10 years, but also the Census Bureau every couple of years does it. Those are the numbers that I always, if somebody says, what's the population? Those are the numbers that I think are much more accurate for somebody that needs to know the true population of the town.
okay, thank you.
Okay. So the last part of my budget is Department 11, Elections and Town Meeting, page 16. As you can see, the personnel costs go way down because, again, we only have one election this year. The printing, advertising, and binding. The major increase to that amount is because of the, I'm sorry, page 28, records management. That's the clerk's office. I'm sorry about that. So that, there isn't much of a change in the personnel service cost, but I think ultimately the numbers will be a little bit different. So my assistant, Linda Golden, has retired. She just retired this week. And so Beth Lawrenson has become the new assistant. So Beth, her salary will go into the assistant slot. We're looking to hire a senior clerk. So I don't know where those numbers are going to fall out, but that's how that's the personnel cost. The training cost has gone up a little bit because we do have a new assistant town clerk. There are some classes that she can take, and so I've put a little more into the training budget so that she can attend those classes so that she can get herself qualified as an assistant town clerk. And the printing, advertising, and binding budget, the reason for the increase there is we went out this past year and asked for some quotes on refurbishing some of our old vital records books. And those vital records, the amount that we had been budgeting, $2,000 per year, didn't even come close to what it's going to cost to refurbish even a single book. So I added more into that line item to see if we could get some of the older books that are literally falling apart redone, and they're part of our history, and we should take good care of them, and so that somebody else can read them another 50 years from now. So that, in a nutshell, is the actual town clerk's budget. One project that we have ongoing in the town clerk's office is the general code recodification of our bylaws. And that was approved last year, the contract cost, and we're going through the process now. We've gone back and forth with them a couple of times, and now they have just sent us their analysis, their legal analysis and recommendations. And now the town bylaw committee, which really usually only exists, to make recommended changes, and they get made and then they disband. But because of this codification project, the bylaw committee is still in existence, and it will be up to us in the next 6 months or so to go over the changes that have been recommended. I think that we'll see most of the results of this work, this recodification, and also combining what's been done in the past with the recommendations that the bylaw committee, even when my predecessor was here, made. All of that will probably end up at town meeting 2022. So it's a long process, but I will tell you, it's amazing. So they put all of the code, they've sort of revamped the code and they've put it into a play site for me. And when John O'Neill did something on Facebook last week or the week before, he said, okay, anybody can ask any question you want. And then I'll send the questions to the different departments and I'll get your answers for you. So he did that. And one of the questions that came to me was, does the town have any bylaws relative to metal detecting? So I looked quickly through the bylaws as we have them published on the website. But then I went into this play site and I just punched in metal detectors. And amazingly, it just immediately showed me everything that said anything about metal. And we don't have any bylaws with reference to metal detectors, which didn't necessarily surprise me. But the ease with which I could go through that code and find stuff because the search mechanism was just great. So I think when this project is finally done, it's going to be a great for everybody, anybody who wants to do any kind of research. So that is the end of my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Well, you're either all asleep.
Thank you very much, Tina. That was a wonderful presentation. Does you have any questions? And congratulations for getting the last year.
Thank you.
The elections and mail-in ballots and so on and so forth. And you did a great job.
Thank you. Staff did a great job.
Does anybody have any questions for Tina?
Just Madam Chair, I would just note that, again, to your point, Tina and her staff, Beth and Linda, really stepped up as so many people did. It was, no question, a challenging time, not only to have a pandemic, but an election cycle. Every 4 years it ramps up anyways, but for other circumstances that I won't go into, it was even more ramped up. So to be able to pull all that off and then to change the venue, which obviously you don't like to change voting locations because you want to make sure everybody, they're familiar with where they vote, and to get through that process. And Tina took care of all of that. We talked about the process, and it was her baby, so to speak. And I just appreciate being able to rely upon department heads to do their thing and do it successfully.
Thank you.
You certainly do have quite a lot of very capable and dedicated department heads, and it's wonderful. They all do a wonderful job. So does anyone have any other questions for Tina? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Tina.
Thank you.
You again. Okay, so moving along, we have minutes. Do we have any public comments waiting for us?
Madam Chair, we have no members of the public in the meeting at this moment.
Thank you. So we have the meeting minutes of February 4th.
Mary Ann Galezo, motion to accept the minutes.
Bernie, I'll second it.
Okay. So I'll do a call on that. John,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Bernie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and I say yes as well. Okay, so that motion is approved. Are there any other comments from the Finance Committee tonight? No? Okay. All right, so we will see you next week, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
You mean Thursday night? What is, oh, today's Thursday.
Yeah.
Never mind.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so Jonathan second, Mary Ann, Michelle,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Bernie? Bernie
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
and Kevin,
Yes.
and I approve as well. All right, that's great. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Hey.
Good night.
Hey.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.